and therefore his experiences and his insight would definitely help us to understand what is really happening in the country on the economic front. Now, without wasting much of a time, I request the Vice Chancellor of Hyderabad Central University, Sri B.J. Rao Garu, who is a great academician and a great administrator, who is now presently the Vice Chancellor of the Hyderabad Central University. Now I call upon him and request him to kindly deliver his speech.
Namaste to all of you. Hari Om Tat Sat. I come from academic domain. I look at the country from that vantage point of view, independent of who is ruling the country. Now when I looked at Modi at 20, it struck me that it must be Modi at 2020 because I am overwhelmed by NEP 2020 as an academician. So I almost connected this title to NEP 2020. I think it's not too much of a mistake because we are on the threshold of implementing NEP 2020, the brainchild of Prime Minister Modi ji. Now the topic is a very heavy topic in many, many ways. Firstly, I want to greet Madam Nirmala Sitharaman ji, the Minister of Finance, Lakshman ji, the MP of our constituency, Ramchandra Rao ji, JP Garu and Khan Sahab. It's a beautiful Hyderabad city where ideas take shape. And on this particular topic, I am somewhat overwhelmed because when I look at Modi at 2020, many things go through my mind. I look at Prime Minister Modi ji as an ideas man. First an ideas man and then perhaps a politician. An ideas man because he is a grounds up person. He looks at the problems at the very ground level, at the level where it can be delivered. He looks at the dimensions of the problem in a real sense, not in a theoretical sense. So after 75 years of journey, when India is looking forward to march into the future, I think he is the right leadership because in the time scale of the universe, in the time scale of the world, although 75 years is too small a blip for a country, the years to come now are strategically extremely important because we are a young nation, demographically and even otherwise, energy-wise. The way we strategize ourselves in the years to come, 25 years, 30, 40, 50 years from now, I think in the time clock of India, Indian civilization, these 50 years to come are the most important years, where the rest of the Western world is aging up. We are going younger. We are energetic. We are full of ideas. Very, very deeply aspirational country. So we get, if we get our acts together now for the coming 50 years with the right leadership, that is a Modi type of leadership, the Modi leadership, I think we will do certain things very well. Please mute the microphones, mute the mobiles. So I look at Modi ji as a person who looks at the country in a different perspective, not like a typical politician actually. Look at the examples of digital success we have. We are probably number one or number two in terms of digital penetration in a very short span of time. Look at our entrepreneurial activities now for the last 5, 6, 7 years. We have not done it in the past. So many interesting startup companies are roaring to go. It took almost 65, 70 years to realize this. Better late than never. In terms of delivery, direct delivery without leakages, I think we have done extremely well for the last few years. We used to talk very proudly of the leakages. Now there are no leakages. The person who deserves gets it. So these are ground reality successes. I do not want to reel out the economic indices in front of Minister Ji here. But of course, post-COVID, if you look at all the indices, I think India is a shining star in terms of many, many economic indices. It is interesting globally that with such high diversity, we stay united and progress well. It is almost a miracle in a very theoretical framework. So therefore, all the credit for staying united, bonded, goes to our ancient thinking, where fundamentally we believe in certain truth which keeps us together independent of what we talk outside. So there's some deep binding in us which keeps us going, and in this kind of binding, leaders like Modi ji come in and they further strengthen it, they ignite it. So independent of some peripheral differences, we get connected. In fact, for the last few years, we are actually getting connected to the main problems of the society. I think it is this connection that is so important for all of us to cling on to and go further. I do not want to tell too many things. I am a very crisp speaker, and in this crispness, I want to emphasize that we must pay attention to certain very important ingredients that we are very proud of. And the ingredients are: how do we strengthen our sense of belonging to the cause of the nation? This strengthening to the cause of the nation, the Bharat, needs to become a lot more deeper. Why do I say so? I say so because we have almost not begun asking, what is that I can do for Bharat? The only relevant question. And we keep asking, what do I get out of it? For everything that the system does, what is there in it for me? That's the question that naturally comes up in our minds. We have not really begun asking, what is that I can do for this Bharat? The moment we start asking that question, I think many things will automatically happen, spontaneously happen, because that question has the power of getting things done. As a nation, ancient nation, we still have not begun asking that question wholeheartedly. I think it is in his leadership that question is getting sharpened. He in fact said so on 15th August. He said so directly, he also said it indirectly. So in this great nation, when we ask the right question, we ask this right question collectively, then the right things will happen. Independent of the political spectrum, we should ask this question. Because this is the only question that is relevant for us now, for the 50, 60, 70 years to come. If we do not ask this question now, we will miss the bus. So as academicians, we keep analyzing these thought processes that the country is going through, the system is going through, the citizens are going through. And one or two very important take-homes are, we ask such questions that takes the system along through the process of dialogue, through the process of action-oriented steps, through the process of deliverables, etc., etc., time-based deliverables, etc., etc. If each of us aligns ourselves in that mode, in whatever we are doing, doesn't matter. Whatever we are doing in terms of our daily duties, if we start doing this for the country, the Bharat, I think many things will happen, which I think not only Bharat is looking for, but the rest of the world is looking for. So this is actually the high time that we serve the right template for the rest of the world. We generate the template first for ourselves, the unique template, and then it is this template that probably will solve very important global problems. In fact, probably India is the only nation that will develop a growth model that is environmentally friendly. There is no other system in the world that is poised to think of a rapid growth model which is also environmentally friendly. So there are many such ideas that we must entertain in and generate actionable delivers and keep working on it with the motto that what is that I can do for this Bharat? The only question that is relevant. Thank you very much. These are the only thoughts I want to say. Namaste.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I request all the members present here to kindly switch off your phone or kindly keep it mute, because while the speakers are speaking, it diverts the attention. So once again, I request all the August gathering to kindly switch off either or mute your telephones. Thank you. Now, we have amongst us Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan, who is also member of Legislative Assembly and founder of Lok Satta. He has championed the cause of electoral reforms, and we know how elections are nowadays. For a common man, it's a distant dream. It will be a distant dream in future. So he's also an expert in public policy and other economical issues. So now I request him to kindly address your gathering.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Esteemed Finance Minister Nirmala Ji, Dr. Lakshman, Professor B.J. Rao, Mr. Khan and friends. No, I'm the only one on the dais who is completely free to speak whatever he wishes. The Finance Minister, being a member of the Cabinet, is collectively responsible to the Parliament and public policy. Therefore, she cannot go beyond what the Cabinet says. And within the government, decorum dictates that she confines her comments or announcements to her domain, the Ministry of Finance. Professor Rao, being a Vice Chancellor, the head of an eminent academic institution, there is a natural academic restraint that position imposes. The members of the Bharatiya Janata Party ultimately have to follow the party's diktats. So I'm the only one who can say pretty much what I please. So forgive me for being very candid, because you don't expect anything else from me. First, I must especially congratulate and thank our Finance Minister. She is our fellow Hyderabadi. She and the Prime Minister have done a remarkable job in the face of the COVID pandemic, against tremendous pressure globally and internally, to spend recklessly, because countries across the world have spent 10% of GDP, 20% GDP. It became the mantra. The way they managed the finances of the country, even as they took care of the sick and the underprivileged in a moment of crisis, is a tribute to economic management of a poor country. I didn't have a chance to talk to her after that, so I would like to take this occasion on behalf of all the citizenry of this city and the country, the thoughtful people of the country, for that very balanced, mature, extremely prudent management, reconciling the needs of the poor on the one hand and the need for fiscal prudence and economic future of the country on the other hand. And I think we've done a masterly job, Nirmala ji. Thank you very much for that. You know, the first time I met Shri Narendra Modi was at, I think it was in 2003, I'm not certain, 2002 or 2003, it was a Gujarat CII summit. He was the chief minister, I was invited as a keynote speaker. We sat next to each other, I was an unknown commodity. We were just briefly introduced. And because the chief minister was busy, understandably, he inaugurated the conference and he left. But his speech stuck in my mind. The first time I heard him. It was in chaste Hindi. It was absolutely on the point about economic growth. And it was not about Gujarat, it was about India. I remember vividly. I was struck by that. Any chief minister would like to sell his state, that's his job. We are not only a cooperative federalism, we are also competitive federalism. The states are competing for resources, for investments, and for growth. And that's the way it should be. But in that backdrop, throughout his speech, he talked about India and its future economic growth and what needs to be done. And placed his own state in that context. That required enormous statesmanship and restraint on the part of a leader. Either during that visit or some months later when I visited Ahmedabad, a friend and batch fellow of mine, Vijay Lakshmi, she was the chairperson of the Electricity Board, Gujarat Electricity Board. We traveled together. She told me the story of what happened with the electricity in Gujarat. Many people don't know. That's the reason why I became very, very attentive and respectful of Narendra Modi's policies and his thinking. We all know electricity is the heart of industrialization and modernization. We all remember not too long ago, getting power 24 hours is a luxury unbelievable. The youngsters may not remember that. There was a time when we had no power. Even in big cities, there were 20 power cuts a day, several hours in a day, in sweltering heat also. And of course, there were no telephones. We were all used to that, our generation. We were all old people. So one day, the chief minister summoned the electricity board chairperson. He said, look, we must give 24-hour power in Gujarat. After discussion, they realized that you can't give 24-hour power for agriculture. Because unless you manage the load distribution, it's not possible. So they came to the conclusion, I must give power to all sectors other than agriculture 24 hours. So what needs to be done? You must segregate the transformers and the distribution network for the agriculture from non-agriculture. You must meter agriculture. And you must, though you subsidize power in agriculture, you must impose some tariff. That people should know that if they consume more, they pay more. The electricity board people said, sir, it's not possible. He said, why is it not possible? Tell us what is the difficulties. They said, sir, 1, 2, 3, 4. He said, all right, give me the cost. What do you require? They said, sir, we'll come back again. But 2 days later, again there was a meeting. And on each head, what is the investment required, what needs to happen, what's the political decision to be taken? The chief minister was briefed. He said, done, done, done. You need this much of money. That money is allocated. Now, give me the timelines. When you are going to do how much? I have done my job, you do your job. He had regular quarterly meetings to review the progress. And Gujarat is the first state in India to deliver 24-hour power to all sectors except agriculture. Way back in 2004-05. Now, that requires real passion and commitment and understanding of the detail, not speech making, not drama. Because without electricity in 21st century, there's no economic activity. Without economic activity, there's no prosperity. No matter how much our hearts bleed for the poor, without economic activity, there are no incomes, there is no prosperity. Narendra Modi understood that. Without fanciful degrees, without fantastic pronouncements, without great papers, the common sense approach to managing the economy and society of the country. Even today, what Gujarat has accomplished, the rest of India has not yet accomplished. But we are on course. Learning from Gujarat, many states are trying to segregate. I've been hearing about that in Telugu states for a long time. Agricultural distributors, transformers, from non-agricultural, you segregate, you do this, you do that. We improved the power sector a little bit, but not much yet. And in agricultural power, he set up meters for every single connection. And remember, unlike in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, in Gujarat, even in those days, it was a drought-prone area. Much of Gujarat is very dry. Today things are better because of late it appears that the rainfall has generally improved in the country. I don't know, maybe we're lucky, beneficiaries of global warming as a continent. It's too early to say, but it's possible. So Gujarat borewells, I remember in 1996 when I went there to monitor the parliamentary election as an official, 1,000 feet borewells were common in those days. For us, typically 300 feet. Nowadays, they're going deeper. But 300 feet borewell for agriculture is normal in our states. 1,000 feet, that means power consumption is higher. Despite that, all agricultural connections were metered. And if some people said, we don't want meters, the government said, all right, you can do without meters, but we calculate how much power is consumed for each agricultural connection. At that time, if I remember, for every horsepower, they discovered that 850 units is consumed. Therefore, we assume if you're not metered, you're consuming 850 units per horsepower. If you have a 10 horsepower motor, we will charge you at 8,500 units. It was subsidized power, but there was a charge. It took guts, it took competence, it took commitment, it took the willingness to pay a political price in the short term to promote the long-term good of the people of this country. And that is true leadership. Pampering people in the short term at the cost of the long term is the easiest and the cheapest and the vulgarest thing you can do in a democracy. It's the normal temptation. You want something, I give you today. Your tomorrow be damned. It's easy. I mean, no brainer. It doesn't require genius, it doesn't require brilliance. It is cheap and vulgar leadership. In the face of that, he could easily have said, no, I can't displease farmers, I can't displease this, I can't have meters, I can't. No. We need that kind of leadership. Whether it's Narendra Modi or somebody, Narendra Modi is not your grandfather, he is not your uncle, he is not my brother. We admire him because he is doing what we need as a country. Yes, is everything completely flawless? Of course, democracy is not flawless. Democracy has so many turns and twists. There are problems and challenges. Politics is the art of the possible. But within that, expanding the envelope and going as far as is practicable within the democratic constraints in an extremely poor country with an absolutely substandard public discourse, forgive me for saying so, it is a monumental challenge for any leader. Any leader. That's why we admire P.V. Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh for initiating reforms in a very complex situation and pursuing them. We admire Vajpayee ji for the extraordinary accomplishments of his. Just remember, until Vajpayee's time, a telephone was a luxury. By the time Vajpayee left, each one of us had telephones. When he came to power, none of us had this. Maybe one or two people had at least 16 rupees a minute. National highways, until that time our so-called national highways were no, we remember. And then lesser known but perhaps even more important decisions carried through consensus in a very difficult situation. The FRBM Act, Vajpayee's gift. The new pension contribution scheme, Vajpayee's gift. Not only did the union government adopt them, every single state, despite his not having a majority, was persuaded to enact laws, and both. Narendra Modi, in many ways, continued that legacy. Has taken it to the next step. And that's the reason why we admire a leader. It doesn't matter who it is, which party it is. I remember another incident when he was chief minister. There was this agitation about Narmada. For long, Narmada, the dam must not be built, hunger strikes, this, that. I don't want to go into details. But to shorten it, one day when I met Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, he was very distressed about this agitation around Andhra. He said, Jayaprakash, I'm very troubled. I said, what's the matter? He said, a monsoon-fed country requires dams and reservoirs. If we don't impound water, the country will be thirsty. Our fields will be parched. But we must protect the farmers who lose the lands. Make sure that they get a fair deal. I said, Prime Minister, you're absolutely right. You put it in perspective. Why don't you lead from the front and tell the country this? But Dr. Manmohan Singh was not in that makeup. He was more like some of us. A civil servant or an academic, very sober, low-key in the background. So he said, no, Jayaprakash, I want a favor from you. I said, what? I will constitute a committee if you agree. If you agree to be a member of that. There is a Supreme Court case pending about the height of the Narmada Dam. And if you quickly make sure that there is a proper report in the interest of the country delivered, then we'll place it before Supreme Court, the court will take care of it. I said, Prime Minister, it's the second option, it's not the best alternative, but if that's what you want, we're all here to serve the nation. Then a committee was appointed. Within about 35 days, we surveyed every single family in Madhya Pradesh affected by the Narmada Sarovar project. And we gave a recommendation. And many of the arguments made earlier without any foundation, they were all exposed because every household was surveyed. And the Supreme Court allowed the dam height to be increased. I forgot all about it. I did what I thought was right. I was always committed to that. Years later, there was a conference in Mumbai on emerging economies. Very eminent people from all over the world, including the Mexican former President Vincent Fox and his Finance Minister Castillo, and several other heads of state, etc. came. Many eminent economists came. I was one of the listed speakers. Shri Narendra Modi was invited as Chief Minister of Gujarat to address. After he finished his address, we were all adjourning for lunch, and I was at some distance. It was a big rectangular kind of an arrangement with about 70, 80 of us participating. So after he finished his speech, as I stood up, he kept shouting my name and came to me and gave me a big embrace. I said, Narendraji, there was no occasion for you to remember me because we only met once and you had no chance of knowing me at all. I'm surprised. He said, मैं कैसा भूल सकता हूँ जयप्रकाश जी? आप इतना मदद किया गुजरात के लिए. I said, मैंने क्या किया? I have no recollection at all. He said, नर्मदा के बारे में? I forgot all about it. I never knew that he knew. But his commitment to his state was so great that he was following very closely what was happening in Delhi. And he must have got through grapevine and through word of mouth who was taking what stand and who was systematically pursuing the issue with evidence to do the right thing. We never talked about it. We never met. Years later, I forgot. I did not even know what he was talking about. He came out with that. I was astounded that most of the time when I meet people, I don't remember names, I must be very honest. You're focused at that point of time, you forget the names and faces. Nirmala ji, I don't know how you're going to manage, how you're managing now, but it's always a problem for me, to be truthful. But for a chief minister with such weighty problems, remembering somebody who had not even met him, and years later on his own coming out, you can see the quality of a person. What the leaders are made of. I remember, well, because of this record, despite the many travails of Gujarat, we all know the problems Gujarat faced or the country faced. But despite all that, the people reposed trust in him because they saw some real stuff, real substance. I remember during the election, I think a few months before the election, I was in Mumbai. A very distinguished retired police officer, one of the most venerable officers of India. He was a Christian himself. He said, Jayaprakash, our Anglo-Indian kids, all of them are saying, Modi, Modi, Modi. I'm surprised. I said, if that's the case, you should be happy. If Modi is able to unite Hindus and Christians and Muslims for a cause bigger than themselves, it's a good thing. What many of us are forgetting is the mandate in 2014 was not for Hindutva, it's not for this region, that religion. It is for India and its future. The people across the country responded because they wanted delivery. They wanted change. They trusted this leader. I remember immediately after I became Prime Minister, I don't know, Nirmala ji, if you remember reading a story in newspapers, I was I was struck by the mood by that. A lady officer in government, I think a central services officer, she wrote her personal experience. I believe she and her another lady colleague, they were traveling to Ahmedabad from Delhi. They were traveling without a proper reservation. They were traveling as RAC, reservation against cancellation. So, as you know, if you are an RAC, I don't know how it is these days, but in those days you can get into the train and you can get a berth only when it's confirmed. Now, it was not confirmed. There were two ladies. There were two berths confirmed in favor of two gentlemen. Very unassuming gentlemen, very polite in behavior. And when they discovered that these ladies didn't have berths, they promptly said, don't worry, you take our berths. When these ladies said, where will you sleep? They said, don't worry. And they had these towels. They spread them on the floor of the railway coach, and they slept there. Who were they? Narendra Modi, Shankar Singh Waghela. I was moved beyond belief when I saw that. We live in an era where an ordinary MRO or a SHO or some other relatively not very high-ranking official, all the time what do? We throw about our weight. We show our arrogance. The commonest expression from public officials in India is, "Evartho maatladutunnavo telusa?" I'm sure all of us experience that, right? In such a society, you have two senior leaders did not even bother to tell them who they were, did not pull rank, and they happily gave to two ladies the berth that they had, and sleep is incredibly important, right? Whatever you do, if you can't sleep, chekak vastundi, tek vastundi, sometimes you become violent, angry. It's not easy. They calmly gave them the berths, who slept on the floor. That is character. That is character. Now, it is these qualities that make Narendra Modi important for today's India. Because most of us were bred on the staple of socialism. When I joined government, I was a fiery socialist. Nirmala ji, I don't know, in JNU you were a socialist or not. I was. Because without knowing much about it. Then I became special officer of Vizag steel plant. Then I discovered that public sector in India is the private sector of those in public office. Since then, I've been an implacable supporter of economic freedom, competition and choice. And the state must limit its role and perform that role very well. Not expand its role and do everywhere badly, which has been the case in India for the past 70 years. Now, what we have to learn through painful experience or learning, free to choose Milton Friedman or somebody else, Narendra Modi understood intuitively. As Varghese Kurian always used to say, a Gujju Bhai is by definition a businessman. So Modi ji understood how economy actually works. It doesn't require textbooks and Nobel laureates and fancy philosophies. If Nirmala ji followed all these Nobel laureates, fancy philosophies during the COVID pandemic, India would have been in deep economic crisis now. Common sense sometimes is the better guide. Not that you should not listen to men of learning and wisdom, but you can never substitute their judgment for yours. At the end of the day, your experience, your insights, your wisdom, your understanding must prevail. That is what leadership is. So we now are perched very well as a country. We have many weaknesses. I have been talking about India's deficiencies for the past 26 years relentlessly, shouting from rooftops. Most of you know that. Whether parties or leaders, whether I talk to Narendra Modi or Manmohan Singh or Sonia Gandhi or LK Advani or somebody else, what I say is exactly the same. I never change my message, I never change my style. I am mindful of the problems of India, the deficiencies in our politics, in our democracy. But today there has to be only one mantra for the next 25 years. India must grow at 8% per annum uninterrupted, sustained. China accomplished 10% for 30 years, an extraordinary achievement. They may be our competitors, in some respects occasionally rivals, but we must admire what they have done. If you say that because we're democratic we cannot accomplish, it's nonsensical. China did not accomplish great growth because of undemocratic approach. Whenever China acted undemocratically, China suffered. The Great Leap Forward led to 20 million Chinese dying of starvation between 1958 and 61. Cultural Revolution led to the decimation of all their cultural treasures and the destruction of their intellectual elites. It is when they did the right things, build infrastructure, decentralize power, build education and healthcare properly, promote skills, and after 1978, thanks to Deng Xiaoping, a great man, encourage investment, production, productivity. China took off. So democracy need not be a constraint. Yes, there are some democratic constraints. Sometimes you have to be patient. But fundamentally, democracy is not and should not be a constraint to economic growth. And India must accomplish this economic growth with democracy and freedoms intact. And we need leadership that clearly understands the desperate need for economic growth, because there is no better antidote to poverty. There is no better opportunity for prosperity. If anybody thinks growth is not important, we can distribute something which doesn't exist without growth, they're talking through their hats. What has happened in the past several years is, what as economists so beautifully put it in their lead story a few weeks ago, there are 4 platforms created. I cannot do better than paraphrasing what economists said. The first is the national market, GST. Of course, GST had teething troubles. But we all knew what life before GST was. Checkposts across every state border, hundreds of trucks lined up, and of course, we all know. If you are a commercial tax inspector at the checkpost, your life is made. And even 25, 30 years ago, some people who knew business, they told me, in those days, every truck, every day, on an average, in those days, paid 200 rupees bribe per day. Today, that amount would be equivalent to about 3,000, 4,000 rupees. I'm talking about 30 years ago, 200 rupees. Huh? I'm sure none of you believe that that 200 is the same as 200 today. Yes, GST had some initial problems, but it's a remarkable accomplishment through consensus, through cooperation. We did it the painstaking way. Years and years of negotiation, discussion, and all the opposition chief ministers or the finance ministers, they were the key players in making this happen. And thanks to that, we today have a national market. The second great thing is some things happening and some things we're making happen. The energy transition globally is happening, and India is now taking the lead. China is still ahead of us, but India is doing pretty well. Then the opportunity that's now created for a variety of reasons, supply chains. There is now a desperate desire across the world to not put all the eggs in one basket, therefore India could well have the opportunity. The supply chains. And the focus, the Modi government especially emphasized on certain sectors of manufacturing. Who would have imagined that a large number of mobile telephones, including the smartphones, will be increasingly manufactured in India? That was our dream. Now it's beginning to happen on a bigger and bigger scale. So that's the second big platform. The third is, of course, our traditional strength for the past 25, 30 years, information technology. And the fourth is a remarkable platform based on technology built to take care of the needs of the poor. The Vice Chancellor talked about leak-proof system. The other day, I was watching some channel, Germany, because now they have an energy crisis in Europe, thanks to the Ukraine war. Germany is finding it very difficult now to distribute whatever they want to give to the poor to meet the energy cost, because they have the capacity to only deal with 100,000 families per day, I believe. In India, if Nirmala decides today, if the Prime Minister approves, by tomorrow you can send to 200 million families whatever the government wants to send. So these four are very strong platforms. They facilitate growth. My appeal to everybody is, it's not about BJP or Narendra Modi or somebody. Narendra Modi will not live forever. I will not live forever. None of us will live forever. But this nation will endure. Our children deserve the best from us. My appeal is, you fight your politics. You vote for whomever you like in elections. At least I can say that as a non-party man. You all may have a desire to ask for your vote, you have a right to do that. But for heaven's sake, whatever you do not cut the nose to spite the face. Do not destroy our children's collective future because you are angry with somebody in power. The anger that you see in this country, the desperate desire to obstruct the good things for no good reason except politicking, is extremely self-defeating. The farm loss is a classic example. As a friend of the farmers throughout my life, I can say categorically, they were extremely pro-farmer. We did immense damage to ourselves as a country by pretending that they were not pro-farmer. Not only the politicians, but the media. The media is playing an extremely negative role without focusing on what is right and what is wrong. Everything is about politics and politicking. Narendra Modi is not hurt. I don't think he has any acre of land. I don't think he cares whether the farm prices are good or not. The people of India are hurt. The farmers of India are hurt. The economic growth prospects of India are hurt. My appeal from this platform to every party and every media house and every intelligent citizen, if he is half intelligent at least, is to go by evidence and logic, not by emotion, shibboleths, or political preferences. India demands it. I will not take much longer. But now that the finance minister is here, I cannot resist the temptation to make an appeal about a few things. Very quickly, my telegraphic list. Nirmalaji, apart from the 4 platforms you created and the commitment to the state's role and the understanding of the role of the market, there are certain dangers ahead. If they are not addressed or if the opportunities are not seized, to maintain 7-8% growth rate for 30 years is not going to be easy. That's why you are aware of that, but it's more for completion's sake I am bringing these to your attention. First is the fiscal problems that some of the states and even the union are now confronting. Now, I don't want to go into freebies, slavery culture and all that, because you can never win that argument. What is a freebie, what is not? Your freebie is my welfare is your freebie. No, there is no end to this process. But we can agree on one basic thing, that you cannot borrow to spend today on current expenditure. If I borrow, it must be to add to the wealth of my children. Every family does it. Forget everything else. Have one basic rule. Don't go into what is a freebie, what is not a freebie. That's an unending battle. You can never win that. But I think it's a reasonable expectation that if it doesn't happen overnight, doesn't matter, over a period of 2-3 years, we will not henceforth borrow to meet the current expenditure needs. That will be adequate. And for that, we need to create an independent council. Some people talk about independent fiscal council, or you can make the finance commission permanent and give that authority and responsibility. These are matters of detail, but some independent body so that people cannot politicize. We are no longer in the Nehruian and Vajpayee era. If Modi says something, KCR will say no. I mean, that's political life, right? You like it or not. Therefore, unless you have an impartial, independent body with expertise and moral authority and legitimacy, it's very difficult to sustain it. Therefore, you may perhaps make the Finance Commission a permanent body. For a long time there was a discussion on that subject. And give them this responsibility in addition to the Finance Commission reports. Or you can create another body. My preference always is to strengthen existing institutions and utilize them rather than build a new institution, because half the time, all my friends in bureaucracy, they'll be looking for where is my car, where is my room, where is my furniture, where is my C's camp clock. So you forget the nation's purpose in creating new institutions. But it's a matter of detail. The second issue is a low-hanging fruit for the country, where not only are you going to do enormous work to alleviate poverty, but you're going to enhance productivity and create employment and generate foreign exchange, healthcare. After COVID, there's a phenomenal opportunity in the country because people are primed now. I don't want to go into details, but at a very low cost, you can transform it. 54 million people, 5.4 crore people are becoming poor every year in this country on account of inadequate access to healthcare. 5.4 crore people are descending into poverty in India every year. Poverty line is not a stagnant one. It's a dynamic process. People come out of it, people get into it. And healthcare is the single biggest cause of impoverishment of India. At a relatively low cost, I understand the fiscal problems. I'm extremely conservative like you and Shri Narendra Modi about money, public money, because it's people's tax money. You cannot be profligate with that. But at a relatively low cost, not merely union and states, annually if you increase about 30,000 crores for over a period of 3 years, incremental 30,000 crores per year, and improve the quality of primary health care, a family doctor of people's choice among a pool of doctors available within 10-15 kilometers, with a payment made on the basis of the services rendered but not on a monthly salary. There are ways of doing it. And tertiary care, because secondary care is taken care of by Ayushman Bharat, by expanding it. But tertiary care, public hospitals are in disrepair. Putting some money. You can radically transform healthcare at a remarkably low cost, and you can create millions of new jobs. You will reduce poverty dramatically. And you will enhance productivity. And if you do a few other things required to make India a much more hospitable destination for health tourism, as they call it now. India this year, many of you may be aware or not aware, I'm sure the finance minister is aware, India is expected to earn about $13.8 billion by providing healthcare services to people abroad who are coming to visit India for healthcare services. $13.8 billion. We can easily make it $100 billion in the next 10 years. We have all the platforms ready with just a bit of tweaking. It will be the next software for the country. It's a win-win-win-win solution. The third is agriculture. Just do one thing. I know we suffered setbacks on account of this sad politics of India, but I don't think much is lost, because many of those things the government of India refuses to use the Essential Commodities Act anyway, whether you have a new law or not is immaterial. And nobody is stopping contract farming anyway in the country. The only thing is the monopoly of the agricultural market committees continues where states don't cooperate. It's their choice, doesn't matter. But compress the market chains. Allow retail chains, Indian or global companies, overcome the resistance and the old-fashioned notions, because today the farmer is getting only 25 to 30 rupees of what the end price is, what you and I are paying at the consumers. Because there's a long market chain. It's inefficient. We require retail chains to be able to compress the market chain, give the farmer a significant proportion of the end price, add value, better storage, and have first-rate retailing and open up export markets. We can easily go for $100 billion farm exports. Even now we are doing about $30-35 billion. We can easily reach $100 billion. There is space there. India, incidentally, has the largest land mass under agriculture in the world. We may be a relatively small country geographically, but 50% of India is agricultural land. No other country has that. We can do a phenomenal job. These are all low-hanging fruit. A decision is already made long ago. Just make it work. Education. There's a very sound policy this government has created. An excellent policy. Very, very thrilling. When I read it, I was so happy that our civil servants actually could write with such a vocation. But make it as a mission. Our education is in complete disrepair, both school education and college education. You are an educationist yourself. You ran a wonderful institution. But most children of India don't have the privilege of going to such institutions. Just to give one instance, 50% of kids in most of the states at the age of 14 to 18 cannot look at a watch and read in India. Read time. My watch shows now 6:52. 80% are able to say somewhere near 7 o'clock, but only 50% are able to say it's 6:50. In 2022, it's absolute truth. It can be easily improved, and you have a wonderful policy. You don't have to spend 1 rupee extra. Just repurpose it, restructure. These are the 4 low-hanging fruit. There are many more things we need to do, we can do. I'm sure when there's an opportunity we can discuss. But please go for it. Don't be halted. The country is ready. The young people of India want jobs and opportunities, and create a climate in which at least the labor-intensive, low-tech industries flourish. I'll conclude with this. There's one wonderful company called Brandex near Anakapalli, in Anakapalli district now in Andhra Pradesh. A Sri Lankan people they invested. 22,000 women from hundreds of villages in the neighboring area were employed in that one company. There's not a single woman from any one of those villages who wants to be employed, doesn't have a job. We only have one brand to talk about in India, or maybe another company, I don't know. We need in every district one such company. The labor laws, the infrastructure, the needless hurdles, remove everything. If you create, let's say, 20, 30 million jobs like that in these sectors which are labor intensive by encouraging large investment and large number of people coming in, the whole attitude will change. Because please remember, in all the private sector, organized employees are under 2 crores in India even now. Add another 2-3 crores, see the energy in the country, see the optimism, see the confidence. The poor will then feel we are part of this growth process. I see exciting possibilities. We have to do much more, but this much at least we need to do for the country. I'm sure with Sri Narendra Modi, his passion, his commitment, and his acceptability to the country above all, his earthiness, there is a tantalizing opportunity. We will seize that moment and make this happen. And much more needs to be done to make our democracy work, but that's a story for another day. Once again, I pay my tribute to the wonderful work done by several teams. It's not merely the Prime Minister, it's the whole political process, it's the Council Ministers, and it's the civil servants, it's the experts, advisors, and ultimately the people of India who respond to these incentives and create productive processes and generate wealth. I pay my humble tribute to all these people who are giving an opportunity for us at long last, much belated opportunity. Better late than never. I hope we will seize the moment and make a difference to this country. And the next generation sitting here 30 years hence will never lament about the problems of India and only look at the opportunities of the future beckoning them. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your excellent explanation of the entire Modi's program, his policies, and your suggestions with regard to the education, agriculture, and other areas. I am reminded of a small incident. When I met Sri Ramoji Rao along with Bandar Dattatreya a few years back, Sri Narendra Modi ji was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. Then Mr. Ramoji Rao, he told us one incident which happened in Gujarat. One of the businessmen from Andhra Pradesh, he had applied for land and somebody wanted to start some factory there, and he was allotted land and also license for starting his factory. And Mr. Modi ji came to learn that this businessman had given some suitcase to the concerned minister, and immediately Mr. Modi ji called both of them and warned that businessman that you don't do all these things in Gujarat, your license will be cancelled if you do such things. And he returned that suitcase to him, and that was the honesty on that day he displayed. And he said on that day, before me and Dattatreya ji, that man like him should be the Prime Minister of this country, he said. And today, under Narendra Modi's 20 years of this, through his administrative experience, at least with this 8 years in our country, we have a corrupt-free government, and that is one of the greatest administrative capabilities of our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister. Because we have very less time, but Chief Guest also has to leave by to Delhi, and before she delivers her lecture, I request our Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha, who has recently been nominated to Rajya Sabha by our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. We are proud that he is also Hyderabadi and also our leader here. And I request that Lakshman ji to kindly address the gathering. Thank you. Honorable Union Minister for Finance, Madam Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman garu, we really feel proud. Madam Nirmala Sitharaman garu, 'garu, 'garu 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 woman defense minister in Modi's government. This is the first time in the history of Indian annals, a woman becoming a defense minister. And she is also a full-fledged finance minister, first time of its kind in the Indian government, subject to correction. Hats off to Modi ji. In the name of empowerment of women, ముఖ్యంగా మనము ఒక తెలుగు ఆడపడుచు దేశ రాజకీయాల్లో ప్రభుత్వంలో కీలకమైన బాధ్యతలు నిర్వర్తిస్తున్నారంటే మనందరం కూడా గర్వపడుతున్నాం. తెలుగు రాష్ట్రాలకు చెందినటువంటి తెలుగు బిడ్డలుగా డాక్టర్ జయప్రకాష్ నారాయణ గారు ఫౌండర్ ప్రెసిడెంట్ లోక్సత్తా, irrespective of his ideologies, he was an inspiration in public life to us. He wanted a change in the politics, value-based politics. But unfortunately, in both these Telugu states, we see a different politics. And our Vice Chancellor, B.J. Rao Garu, Hyderabad University, things are getting changed. I really congratulate the Vice Chancellor. Mr. Khan Garu and my friend Mr. Ramchandra, former MLC. Ramchandra is a criminal lawyer. I really congratulate the convener and his team for organizing this symposium on Modi at 20, the making of a new India. 20 years of public life, Modi ji, relentless, untiring, uncompromising, and corruption-free governance. People used to call Gujarat model when he was in Chief Minister for Gujarat. People all over the world now talk about India model. We have been celebrating this 75 years of Azadi Amrit Mahotsav. 75 సంవత్సరాల స్వాతంత్ర దేశంలో 60 సంవత్సరాల పైగా ఈ దేశాన్ని ఒక పార్టీ పాలించింది. దాదాపు 40 సంవత్సరాలు ఒకే కుటుంబం ఈ దేశాన్ని పాలించింది. 75 సంవత్సరాల్లో ఎక్సెప్ట్ ఫర్ ఫ్యూ వాజ్పేయి గారి రిజిమ్ తప్పితే ఇంతకుముందు చెప్పినట్టుగా ఒక పార్టీ, ఒక కుటుంబం భారత పౌరులుగా తల ఎత్తుకోలేని పరిస్థితిలో రోజువారీగా పతాక శీర్షికల్లో కుంభకోణాలు, అవినీతి, ఈవెన్ ఇండియన్ డయాస్పోరా, మనం విదేశాలకు వెళ్ళినప్పుడు కూడా పీపుల్ ఫీల్ ashamed to be called as Indians at that time, more particularly 2004 to 2014. Not only policy paralysis, corruption, rampant corruption. అందుకనే మోడీ గారు ఈ రెండు అంశాల మీద ప్రధానంగా డైనాస్టిక్ రూల్, ఈ కరప్షన్ మీద, ఈ రెండు కూడా ప్రభుత్వంలో, పాలనలో, పార్టీలో కూడా ఎక్కడ కూడా వంశపారపర రాజకీయాలు, అవినీతికి తావునటువంటి రాజకీయాలను, పాలనను ఈరోజు తెర మీదకి తీసుకురావడం, సబ్కా సాత్ సబ్కా వికాస్ అనే నినాదంతో ఇంక్లూజివ్ గవర్నెన్స్. ఇవాళ 75 సంవత్సరాలు మనం చూసాం, ఒకే కుటుంబంలోని సభ్యులు ప్రభుత్వంలో, పార్టీలో. దానికి భిన్నంగా ఇవాళ మోదీ గారి ప్రభుత్వంలో when we speak of social justice, సామాజిక న్యాయం గురించి మాట్లాడుతున్నప్పుడు ఫస్ట్ టైం ఇన్ ద ఇండియన్ హిస్టరీ 70% ఆఫ్ యూనియన్ మినిస్ట్రీ కాన్స్టిట్యూట్స్ SC, ST, BC, minority and women. Never in the past. ఆ తరహా ప్రభుత్వంలో పాలనలో వారు తీసుకొస్తూ ఇవాళ మీరు చూశారు 75 సంవత్సరాల్లో ఒక ఆదివాసీ మహిళ అనేక సంఘర్షణలతో జీవితంలో రాణించినటువంటి ఒక మహిళ, ఒక గిరిజన అడవి బిడ్డను ఇవాళ భారత అత్యున్నత స్థానంలో రాష్ట్రపతిగా ఇవాళ తీసుకొచ్చారంటే అది ఒక మోదీజీ, అది భారతీయ జనతా పార్టీకే మాత్రం సాధ్యమైంది. డాక్టర్ జయప్రకాష్ నారాయణ చెప్పినట్టుగా ఐ విల్ బి ఫెయిలింగ్ ఇన్ మై డ్యూటీ ఇఫ్ ఐ డజంట్ షోకేస్ వాట్ మై పార్టీ అండ్ గవర్నమెంట్ హస్ డన్. ఇట్ ఇస్ మై కాబట్టి ఈ విధమైనటువంటి పాలన ఈ 8 సంవత్సరాల్లో అనేకమైనటువంటి అద్భుతాలు. ఒకవైపు అభివృద్ధి, సంక్షేమం రెండు పాలలో సమపాలలో తీసుకెళ్తూ ఈ దేశంలో ఉంటున్న మెజారిటీ ప్రజల మనోభావాలు కాపాడే నిర్ణయాలు, ఒక చరిత్రాత్మక నిర్ణయాలతో కరప్షన్ ఫ్రీ గవర్నెన్స్ అన్నప్పుడు 8 సంవత్సరాలు ఒక చిన్నపాటి అవినీతి ఆరోపణ లేకుండా ఈ ప్రభుత్వం పాలన సాగిస్తూ ఉంటే నిజంగా ఇది మోదీకి మాత్రమే సాధ్యమైంది. మోదీ గారు పదే పదే టీమ్ ఇండియాగా వారు మాట్లాడుతూ ఉంటారు. టీమ్ ఇండియా ఇన్ ద సెన్స్ ఈ ఫెడరల్ సిస్టంలో కేవలం ఎన్నికల వరకే రాజకీయాలు, ఎన్నికల తర్వాత అన్ని ప్రాంతాలు, అన్ని వర్గాల సమదృష్టితో అభివృద్ధి, సంక్షేమం పాటించినాడే అది టీమ్ ఇండియాగా భావిస్తామని చెప్పి ఇవాళ ఆ తరహా పాలన ఇవాళ ఈరోజు తెలుగు రాష్ట్రాల్లో, 2 రాష్ట్రాల్లో ప్రజలు భారతీయ జనతా పార్టీకి ఆశించిన మేరకు ఇవాళ తీర్పునివ్వకపోయినది. పెద్ద సంఖ్యలో ఇక్కడ ఎమ్మెల్యేలు, ఎంపీలను గెలిపించకపోయినప్పటికీ కూడా ఇవాళ మోదీ గారు ఈ 2 రాష్ట్రాల పట్ల, ఈ 2 రాష్ట్రాల ప్రజలను దృష్టిలో పెట్టుకొని ఏ రకంగా అభివృద్ధికి పెద్దపీట వేస్తూ పేదలను కూడా సంక్షేమంలో భాగస్వాములు చేస్తూ ఏ విధమైన కార్యక్రమాలు చేపడుతున్నారో ఇవాళ మనం గమనిస్తున్నాం. ఇవాళ హైవేస్ గురించి మాట్లాడారు డాక్టర్ జయప్రకాష్ గారు. తెలంగాణకు జాతీయ రహదారులు అంటే అదొక అభూత కల్పనగా ఇవాళ తెలంగాణకు దాదాపు 1,00,000 కోట్ల రూపాయల బడ్జెట్తో నేషనల్ హైవేస్, సపోజ్ టు బి ద సెకండ్ లార్జెస్ట్ స్టేట్ ఇన్ ద కంట్రీ హ్యావింగ్ సచ్ అన్ ఎక్స్టెంట్ ఆఫ్ హైవేస్. ఇవాళ ఇది హ్యాట్స్ ఆఫ్ టు మోదీజీ. కాబట్టి ఇవాళ డెవలప్మెంట్లో కానీ సంక్షేమంలో కానీ ఏమాత్రం కూడా ఇర్రెస్పెక్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద పార్టీ విచ్ ఇస్ ఇన్ పవర్ ఇన్ ద స్టేట్, అన్ని రాష్ట్రాలు, ప్రాంతాలు అభివృద్ధి చెందాలి అని దృక్పథంతో ఇవాళ పనిచేస్తూ ఉన్నప్పుడు వారు 2014 వచ్చినప్పుడు కూడా ఈ ప్రభుత్వము పేదలకు అంకితమని, పేదల సంక్షేమం కోసం పాటుపడే ప్రభుత్వమని వారు ఏ సంకల్పంతోనైతే ఇవాళ అంత్యోదయ సిద్ధాంతాన్ని ఆధారంగా చేసుకొని పనిచేస్తున్నారో, సమాజం నుండి చిట్ట చివరి వ్యక్తి, ద లాస్ట్ మ్యాన్ ఇన్ ద సొసైటీ, పూరెస్ట్ అమంగ్ ద పూర్, వారికి మొదటగా ఆ సంక్షేమ ఫలాలు అందాలని ఒక సంకల్పంతో పనిచేస్తూ ఆ రకంగా ఈరోజు కష్టకాలంలో, కరోనా కష్టకాలంలో ఏ పేదవాడు కూడా ఈ దేశంలో ఆకలితో అలమటించకూడదు. కోయి బి గరీబ్ భూకా పేట్ నై సోనా, ప్రధానమంత్రి గరీబ్ కళ్యాణ్ యోజన పేరు మీద 2 సంవత్సరాల పైగా ఇవాళ 80 కోట్ల మందికి 3,50,000 కోట్ల రూపాయలతో ఇవాళ ప్రతి కుటుంబంలో ప్రతి వ్యక్తికి 5 కిలోల బియ్యాన్ని పంపిణీ చేస్తున్నారంటే అది పేదల పట్ల వరకు ఉన్నటువంటి అంకిత భావం. ఏ ప్రాంతం నుంచి అయితే ఇవాళ నేను ప్రాతినిధ్యం వహిస్తున్నాను, ఉత్తరప్రదేశ్ నుంచి కూడా, ఉత్తరప్రదేశ్లో కూడా మోదీ అండగా ఇవాళ యోగిజీ ప్రభుత్వం ఈ నిశుల్క్ రేషన్ పేరు మీద నెలకు ఇవాళ ఉచిత బియ్యంతో పాటు 5 కిలోల బియ్యంతో పాటు 1 किलो गेहूँ, 1 किलो दाल, 1 किलो तेल, 1 किलो चीनी, 1 किलो नमक, हर महीना 2 बार निःशुल्क राशन पूरा उत्तर प्रदेश के अंदर लगभग 15 लाख आबादी को आज उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार योगी जी दिया जा रहा है. अंदर मोस्ट ऑफ देम आर irrespective of caste and religion. ఆ పేద వాళ్లకు 15 కోట్ల మంది సహాయం అందిస్తూ ఉంటే అండ్ మోస్ట్ ఆఫ్ దెమ్ ఆర్ బెనిఫిషరీస్ బిలాంగ్ టు ముస్లిం కమ్యూనిటీ. దిస్ ఈస్ ద వెల్ఫేర్ ప్రోగ్రామ్ ఆఫ్ మోదీజీ అండ్ యోగీజీ. ఉత్తరప్రదేశ్ మోడల్ వెల్ఫేర్ డెవలప్మెంట్ యాక్టివిటీ తెలంగాణకు రావాలని ఇక్కడ నేను ప్రస్తావించినప్పుడు మన యువరాజు హేళన చేశాడు, ఎగతాళి చేసి మాట్లాడాడు. ఇవాళ సంక్షేమానికి ఉచితాలకు వ్యత్యాసం లేకుండా మీరు మాట్లాడుతున్నారు. ఇవాళ నేను ఇవాళ డాక్టర్ జయప్రకాష్ కూడా అప్పీల్ చేస్తున్నాను, లెట్ ద డిబేట్ గో ఆన్. ఈ యొక్క ఫ్రీబీస్ వెల్ఫేర్ దానికి ఏదో లక్ష్మణ రేఖ. ఫ్రీబీస్ ఉచితాలు అర్హులక అందరికా? ఈ ఫ్రీబీస్ అనేది నీడీ ఆఫ్ ద సొసైటీయా లేకపోతే గ్రీడీ ఆఫ్ ద సొసైటీయా? ఆలోచన చేయాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంది. రైతు బంధు పేరు మీద చిన్నకారు రైతులకు, సన్నకారు రైతులకు, పేద రైతులకు, 6 కాలం కష్టపడి కౌలు వేసుకునే రైతులకు ఈ రైతు బంధు వర్తిస్తే ఎవరికీ అభ్యంతరం లేదు. 100 ఎకరాలతో ఇవాళ వ్యవసాయం చేయనటువంటి ఇవాళ భూములు కూడా ప్రజలు కట్టే పన్నుల ద్వారా రైతు బంధు పేరు మీద మీరు ఇవాళ దేనికోసం అనేది ఇవాళ ప్రశ్నించే సమయం, చర్చించాల్సిన సమయం ఇవాళ అవసరం. అందుకనే ఇవాళ ఒక పార్టీ నాయకుడిగా, కార్యకర్తగా మేము మాట్లాడితే దానికి రాజకీయ కోణం. అందుకనే పెద్దలు డాక్టర్ జయప్రకాష్ నారాయణ లాంటి వాళ్ళు దీని ఖచ్చితంగా చర్చకు తెర లేపాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంది. మీరందరూ కూడా ఒపీనియన్ మేకర్స్ లేదా ఎలైట్ ఆఫ్ ద సొసైటీ కాబట్టి ఖచ్చితంగా ప్రజలను ప్రభావితం చేసే విధంగా చర్చలు జరగాల్సిన ఆవశ్యకత ఉంటుంది. ఇవాళ చెప్పారు డాక్టర్ జయప్రకాష్ గారు, మేడం నిర్మలా సీతారామన్ గారు, కరోనా కష్టకాలంలో నిజంగా ఎంత ఒత్తిడి, ప్రపంచమంతా కూడా ఆర్థికంగా చితికిపోతున్న ప్రస్తుత పరిస్థితుల్లో భారతదేశం ఇవాళ ఆర్థికంగా స్థిరంగా ఉండడమే కాకుండా మన గ్రోత్ రేటును ఇవాళ 8.2 మెయింటైన్ చేసుకుంటూ ఇవాళ భారతదేశం స్థిరంగా నిలబడగలిగింది. ఇవాళ స్వదేశీ సంస్థల ద్వారా ఉత్పత్తి చేసినటువంటి ఇవాళ ఏదైతే వ్యాక్సిన్ 200 కోట్ల పై చిలుకు ఇవాళ ఉచితంగా పంపిణీ చేయగలిగినాము, ఉచితంగా ఇవ్వగలిగినాము. దాదాపు 100 దేశాల పైగా మనం సరఫరా చేయగలమంటే ఇవాళ మోదీ గవర్నమెంట్ ద్వారానే సాధ్యమైంది. ఇలాంటి వెల్ఫేర్ యాక్టివిటీస్లో స్వచ్ఛ భారత్ దాదాపు 11.5 కోట్ల మందికి మహిళలకు ఆత్మగౌరవంతో ముడిపడిన అంశానికి మరి మోదీ గారు ఏ రకంగా ఇవాళ మరుగుదొడ్ల నిర్మాణం, వారు అధికారంలో వచ్చినప్పుడు 18,000 గ్రామాల్లో కనీసం కరెంటుకు నోచుకుంటూ ఉన్న పరిస్థితి. దాన్ని వార్ ఫుటింగ్గా 1000 రోజుల్లో ఆ గ్రామాల్లో, పల్లెల్లో ఆ యొక్క విద్యుతీకరణ జరగాలంటే ఆ టాస్క్ ఏ రకంగా పూర్తి చేశారో మీరు చూశారు. హర్ గల్ నల్సే జల్ అని దాదాపు ఇవాళ 6.5 కోట్ల మందికి ఇవాళ పరిశుభ్రమైనటువంటి నీళ్ళు అందించే కార్యక్రమంలో ఏ రకంగా కుత్తెలవుతున్నారు. మరి ఫినాన్స్ మినిస్టర్గా ప్రధానమంత్రి స్వనిధి కార్యక్రమం, వీధి వ్యాపారం చేసుకునే వాళ్ళు కరోనాలో ఉపాధి కోల్పోయి దుర్భరమైన జీవితాన్ని గడుపుతున్నప్పుడు ఒక ఆపన్న హస్తంలాగా ఇవాళ స్ట్రీట్ వెండర్స్కు దాదాపు 30 లక్షల మందికి ఏ రకంగా ఆర్థిక సాయాన్ని అందించి హైదరాబాద్లోనే ఒక హైదరాబాద్ లిమిట్స్లోనే 1,00,000 మందికి ఇవాళ వీధి వ్యాపారులకు వారికి ఇవాళ పూర్తి భద్రత కల్పించి వాళ్ళ వ్యాపారం చేసుకునే స్థాయికి ఇవాళ కల్పించడం అంటే ఆయుష్మాన్ భారత్ పేరు మీద 5 లక్షల ఉచితంగా ఆరోగ్య బీమా, అది మన రాష్ట్రానికి ఆ కష్టకాలంలో వర్తింప చేయలేదు. అనేక మంది ఏ రకంగా కరోనాకు బాధితులైనారో మనం కళ్ళారా చూసాం. ఈ కార్పొరేట్ హాస్పిటల్ దోపిడీ తట్టుకోలేక ఆర్థికంగా చితికిపోయి ప్రాణాలు కోల్పోయి, కానీ దేశమంతా కూడా ఆయుష్మాన్ భారత్ అమలు అవుతుంది. తెలంగాణలో ఆయుష్మాన్ భారత్ అమలుకు నోచుకోదు. ఎవరికి పెద్దపీట వేశారు, పెద్దవాళ్ళకా పేదలకా అనేది ఆలోచన చేసుకోవాల్సిన అవసరం. ఆ రకంగా మరి ప్రధానమంత్రి జన్ధన్ యోజన పేరు మీద పేదవాళ్ళ ఖాతాలు తెరిపిస్తే 32 కోట్ల మందికి అదనంగా జీరో బ్యాలెన్స్తో ఎగతాళి చేశారు. ఇవాళ పేదవాడి ఖాతా తెరిస్తే ఏమవుతుందని ఇవాళ మనం చూస్తున్నాం. ఇవాళ కేంద్రం నుంచి ప్రతి రూపాయి ఏదైతే పేదవాడి కోసం ఢిల్లీ నుంచి పంపిస్తూ ఉంటే ఒక్క రూపాయి కోత లేకుండా నేరుగా పేదవాడి బ్యాంక్ ఖాతాలో చేరుతుందంటే దట్ ఈస్ మోడీస్ గవర్నమెంట్. రాజీవ్ గాంధీ గారు ప్రధానమంత్రిగా ఉన్న సందర్భంలో స్వయంగా వారు చెప్పారు, ఢిల్లీ నుంచి 100 రూపాయలు పంపిస్తే పేదవాడి కోసం 85 రూపాయలు దళారీ కాజేస్తూ ఉన్నాడు, 15 రూపాయలు మాత్రమే దక్కుతాం. దట్ ఈస్ ద డిఫరెన్స్ బిట్వీన్ రాజీవ్ గాంధీ అండ్ మోడీజీ. ఇవాళ కొన్ని లక్షల కోట్ల రూపాయలు ఇవాళ పేదవాడికి ఇవాళ బ్యాంక్ ఖాతాలో నేరుగా చేరుతాను అంటే కరోనా కష్టకాలంలో 500 రూపాయలు నెలకు మరి పంపిణీ చేస్తే ఏ రకంగా లాక్డౌన్ సందర్భంలో కూడా బారులు తీరి నిలబడి బ్యాంకుల ముందు 500 కోసం పరితపించారో ఒక్క రూపాయి కోత లేకుండా. ఇది మోదీ తరహా పాలన ఇవాళ. అందుకనే వి హ్యావ్ సీన్ ఇండియా ఇన్ అదర్ మ్యానర్. కాంగ్రెస్ హయాంలో ద గ్యాప్ బిట్వీన్ ద పూర్ అండ్ రిచ్, ద రూరల్ అండ్ అర్బన్, హ్యావ్స్ అండ్ హ్యావ్ నాట్స్, ప్రివిలేజ్ అండ్ అండర్ ప్రివిలేజ్, ఏ రకమైనటువంటి వ్యత్యాసం మనం కల్లారా చూసాం. నౌ మోడీ ఈస్ ట్రయింగ్ హిస్ బెస్ట్ టు బ్రిడ్జ్ ద గ్యాప్ బిట్వీన్ దీస్ సెక్షన్స్. ఆ రకంగా ఇండియా దట్ ఈస్ భారత్ అనే రీతిలో ఇవాళ ఏ రకంగా అభివృద్ధి సంక్షేమం రెండు కూడా సమపాలలో అభివృద్ధి విషయం ప్రస్తావిస్తూ ఉంటే ఇవాళ ఆల్ ఇండియా ఇన్స్టిట్యూట్ ఆఫ్ మెడికల్ సైన్స్ ఈ అనతి కాలంలోనే కొత్తగా 15 మెడికల్ కాలేజెస్, 200 పైగా మెడికల్ కాలేజ్ దేశవ్యాప్తంగా. ఇవాళ ప్రతి జిల్లాలో ఒక మెడికల్ కాలేజ్కు ఇవాళ అంకురార్పణ చేస్తూ ఉన్నారు మోదీ ప్రభుత్వం. ప్రతి మండల్లో కూడా హెల్త్ అండ్ వెల్నెస్ సెంటర్. ఇవాళ ఆ వెల్నెస్ సెంటర్ పేరు మార్చి మన రాష్ట్రంలో బస్తీ దవాఖానాలను లేకపోతే పట్టణ దవాఖానాలను పేరు మార్చుకుంటున్న తప్పితే నిధులు కేంద్రానివి, ప్రచారం రాష్ట్రానికి, సొమ్మొక్కడిది సోకొక్కడిది ఇవాళ మనం కళ్ళారా చూస్తూ ఉన్నాం. అందుకని ఇంతకుముందు చెప్పినట్టుగా ఎడ్యుకేషన్ అండ్ ఇవాళ ఏదైతే మరి వైద్యం ఉందో విద్యా వైద్యం పట్ల కొంత కష్టకాలంలో కూడా మొన్న బడ్జెట్లో మేడం నిర్మలా గారు ఇవాళ ఐ కెన్ ఛాలెంజ్, ఐఎమ్ ప్రిపేర్ టు ఎనీ సార్ట్ ఆఫ్ డిబేట్ విత్ ది సో కాల్డ్ గవర్నమెంట్. ఇవాళ బీజేపీ పాలిత రాష్ట్రాలు కానీ కేంద్ర ప్రభుత్వం కానీ ఇవాళ విద్యకు కేటాయించిన బడ్జెట్, వైద్యానికి కేటాయించిన బడ్జెట్ ఒక్కసారి కనుక మనం కంపేర్ చేసేటే తెలంగాణ ఇస్ సపోజ్ టు బి ద లీస్ట్ ఇన్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్ అండ్ ఈవెన్ ఇవాళ వైద్య రంగం వాళ్ళ బడ్జెట్ కేటాయింపు. కాబట్టి సమయం భావం వల్ల నేను మీ ముందు పెట్టలేకపోతున్నాను. కానీ ఇవాళ ప్రధానమంత్రి కౌశల్ వికాస్ యోజన పేరు మీద ఈ దేశంలో యువత దాదాపు 1,40,00,000 మందికి వారికి శిక్షణ కల్పించి మోడీజీ డజంట్ వాంట్ ఎనీ యూత్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ కంట్రీ టు వాండర్ ఫర్ జాబ్స్. హీ డజంట్ వాంట్ ఎనీ యూత్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ కంట్రీ టు బీ ఏ జాబ్ సీకర్, రాదర్ హీ బికమ్స్ ఏ జాబ్ క్రియేటర్. ప్రతి చదువుకున్నటువంటి యువకుడు వ్యక్తి ఉపాధి కల్పించే ఒక సంస్థగా మారాలి తప్పితే కేవలం వ్యక్తిగతమైన ఉద్యోగం కోసం వెంపర్లాడకూడదు అనే దృష్టికోణంతో ఏ రకంగా ఇవాళ స్టాండప్ ఇండియా కానివ్వండి, స్టార్టప్ పేరు మీద కానివ్వండి, ఏ రకమైనటువంటి ఇవాళ ఉమెన్ ఎంపవర్మెంట్లో భాగంగా అనేకమైనటువంటి సదుపాయాలు కల్పిస్తున్నారు, రుణాలు కల్పిస్తున్నారు, మనం కళ్ళారా చూస్తున్నాం. అందుకనే ఈరోజు ప్రత్యేకంగా మహిళల కోసం ఇవాళ 75 లక్షల సెల్ఫ్ హెల్ప్ గ్రూప్స్, 8 కోట్ల మందికి మహిళా పారిశ్రామికవేత్తలు అనుసంధానం చేసి వాళ్ళ కాళ్ళ మీద వాళ్ళు నిలబడే విధంగా సొంతంగా ఏ రకంగా వారు ఇవాళ సాయుధ దళాల్లో కూడా మహిళలకు సమాన హోదా కల్పించి ఆ రకంగా స్టాండప్ ఇండియాలో 80% లోన్స్ ఇవాళ ఉమెన్ ఎంటర్ప్రెన్యూర్స్కి. ముద్రా యోజనలో దాదాపు 68% ఉమెన్ ఆర్ ద బెనిఫిషరీస్. అంతేకాకుండా సైనిక్ స్కూల్స్లో కూడా మొదటిసారిగా ఈరోజు అమ్మాయిలు కూడా ప్రవేశం కల్పించినటువంటి ప్రభుత్వం మోదీ ప్రభుత్వం. ఇవాళ విల్ సర్ప్రైజ్ టు నో ఫస్ట్ టైం ఈ అకాడమిక్ ఇయర్లో యాజ్ ఫార్ as దిస్ OBCs and economically weaker sections are concerned, 27% are reserved for OBCs in all Kendriya Vidyalaya, Navodaya Pathshala, Sainik schools, law universities. On an average, 4 lakh students are getting benefit out of this reservation. Not only socially discriminated sections, even economically weaker sections unnaro వాళ్ళకు కూడా 10% ఇచ్చినటువంటి ప్రభుత్వం మోదీ ప్రభుత్వం. ఈ రకంగా వారు మరి ఈ యొక్క డెవలప్మెంటు అభివృద్ధి ఏ దిశలో తీసుకెళ్తున్నాడో మనం చూస్తున్నాం. కాబట్టి ఈ మోదీ గారి యొక్క 20 సంవత్సరాల పాలనలో ఆస్పిరేషన్స్ కూడా ఇవాళ యూత్లో కానీ ఎక్స్పెక్టేషన్స్ ఏదైతే ఉన్నదో తప్పకుండా ఇవాళ మోదీ గారు ఐ స్ట్రాంగ్లీ బిలీవ్ హీ ఈజ్ అన్ గాడ్ సెంట్ మ్యాన్. ఎందుకంటే మనం చూస్తున్నాం ఇవాళ ఏ రకంగా ఇవాళ మనం ప్రజల యొక్క అవసరాలు తీర్చడంలో పేదవాడి యొక్క కనీసమైనటువంటి సదుపాయాలు కల్పించడం మొదలుకుంటే ఇవాళ డెవలప్మెంట్స్ విషయంలో ఇంతకుముందు చెప్పినట్టుగా బుల్లెట్ ట్రైన్స్ కానివ్వండి, లేకపోతే డిఫెన్స్ సెక్టార్లో కానివ్వండి, స్వయం సమృద్ధి సాధించడానికి ఆత్మనిర్భర్ పేరు మీద ఏ రకంగా ఇవాళ మనం ప్రోత్సాహం కల్పిస్తున్నారో, కాబట్టి ఖచ్చితంగా ఈ అంశాలన్నీ కూడా ప్రజల్లో చర్చనీయం కావాల్సిన అవసరం ఉన్నది. మనం ఈ దేశం ఇంకా వేగంగా ముందుకు పోవాలి, విశ్వగురుగా మారాలంటే ప్రజల యొక్క భాగస్వామ్యం కూడా అవసరమని విశ్వసించే పార్టీగా, ప్రభుత్వంగా మీ అందరినీ కూడా హైదరాబాద్లో ఉన్నటువంటి మీ అందరూ కూడా మనం చూస్తున్నాం. ఇవాళ తెలంగాణ రాష్ట్రం ఏ దిశలో పయనిస్తున్నది. కేవలం ఓటు బ్యాంక్ రాజకీయాల కోసం కాకుండా ధనిక రాష్ట్రమైనటువంటి తెలంగాణ ఇవాళ దాదాపు 4 లక్షల కోట్ల అప్పు, పుట్టబోయే ప్రతి బిడ్డ పేరు మీద కూడా 1 లక్ష పైగా ఇవాళ అప్పుతో పుడుతున్నటువంటి విషయాన్ని మనం ఈ రాష్ట్రంలో కూడా ఏదైతే ఇవాళ కరప్షన్ ఫ్రీ గవర్నెన్స్ కోసం లేదా ఫ్యామిలీ రూల్ పట్ల ఇవాళ మొత్తం సమాజం కూడా స్పందించాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంది. ఒక ప్రజాస్వామిక పాలనకు తెరదీయడానికి కూడా ముందుకు రావాల్సిందిగా మీ అందరితో కోరుతూ ఈ అవకాశం ఇచ్చినటువంటి నిర్వాహకులకు మిత్రులందరికీ కూడా ధన్యవాదాలు చెప్తూ సెలవు తీసుకుంటాను. We are all waiting for today's chief guest address. But before that, I would like to introduce Mr. Mir Nazir Ali Khan, who is the Consulate General of the Kyrgyzstan for both Andhra Pradesh and Telangana state. And he is one amongst us. And I also acknowledge the presence of Professor Ramna Rao, Director NIT, Warangal, Dr. Professor Sri Bhushan, Justice Bhushan Garu, NCLT member, Burugula Sham Lakshminarayan Garu, the grandson of Burugula Ramkishan Rao, the Chief Minister of Hyderabad State, Ponguleti Sudhakar Reddy Garu, Dr. Anil Malpugar, and then Karnagopal Madam and other Bihar corporators, Dr. then Raj Lachmikar and Sunita Yadav, I'm not able to see. Then actors Kavita Garu and Dr. Padma Garu and others here. Those who I'm able to see, I'm just, it's a gathering of many ACS, company secretaries, chartered accountants, advocates, and the elites of Hyderabad are here. Before I hand over the mic to the chief guest, because the question of freebies and all come. So I addressed in the council when I was debating some issues. I narrated one small incident, and that was like this, that ఒక వ్యక్తి ఊళ్ళో వాడు కళ్ళు అంటే తాడి చెట్టు కింద కళ్ళు తాగుతుంటాడు. వాడు ఫ్రెండ్ ఇంటికి పోయి, అరే అమ్మ ఎక్కడ ఉన్నాడు నా ఫ్రెండ్ అంటే, ఆడ పొలంలో తాడి చెట్టు కింద ఉన్నారా అంటాడు. వీడు ఆ పొలం దగ్గర పోయి ఆ ఫ్రెండ్ అడుగుతాడు, అరే ఏంద్రా నువ్వు అంతా సోమరిపోతు తయారైనవంట, రోజు కళ్ళు చెట్టు కింద కళ్ళు తాగుతున్నాడు తాడి చెట్టు కింద అంటే, అరే ఏం చేయాలరా, మా అమ్మ నాన్నకు ఆసరా పెన్షన్ వస్తుంది 2000 ఫికర్ లేదన్నమాట. అరే మరి మనము రైతులం కదా, మనం పంట పండియాలి అంటే రైతు బంధు వస్తూనే ఉండే, మనం పండించకుండా వస్తుంది అని అంట. అట్లా కాదురా, మన చెల్లె పెళ్లి చేయాలి అంటే లక్ష్మీ కళ్యాణం వస్తూనే ₹1,00,000 వస్తూనే ఉండే కదా అంటాడు. అలాగనే అరే ఆ ఉద్యోగం చేయాలి కదా కనీసం అంటే, అరే నెక్స్ట్ మంత్ నుంచి మనకు నిరుద్యోగ భత్తా ఇస్తాంట ₹3,000 అన్నాడు. వీడి ఫ్రెండ్ ఉరుకుతున్నాడు, అరే ఏడిపోతున్నారా అన్నాడు. వస్తారా నువ్వు పట్టణకు పోయి నా ఉద్యోగం రిజైన్ చేసి నీతో కూర్చుంటా అన్నాడు వాడు. వీ డోంట్ వాంట్ లేజీ తెలంగాణ, వీ వాంట్ ఎ ప్రొడక్టివ్ తెలంగాణ. దిస్ వాట్ ఐ సెడ్ ఇన్ కౌన్సిల్. This is on record. You go to YouTube, see my speeches, it is there on record. I said, we are not against the welfare schemes, but you have to identify who are eligible for it. If you make everyone lazy, it is not a productive Telangana. We want a productive Telangana. And secondly, that today, when the UPA government was there, the states were getting 32% of tax devolution. But after Narendra Modi's rule came, because he himself was the chief minister, he saw the plight of the chief ministers and then increased the tax devolution to 42%. And apart from that, 7% for the local self-government. There is 49% of the total tax devolution is being given to the states, including the state of Telangana. And today, every time there is a hue and cry that we don't get our share, we are not getting our share. People must understand what is reality. So therefore, with these few words, now I request today's chief guest, and I need not introduce her. She is the first lady defense minister. We are proud of her. She is our Hyderabadi, basically, and she was the first finance minister, full-fledged finance minister, and she's a pride for all of us. And we are really happy, madam, that you have given some time to speak to all the gathering here. We were waiting since almost 4:30, and now I request you to kindly address the gathering. Thank you.
Good evening to all the eminent people sitting on the dais and also the august gathering before me. It's always a pleasure to address audiences in Hyderabad. And I start with an apology for having come late. I had a press conference in the party office which stretched a bit longer than I anticipated. But I also am grateful that you waited all the while. But I think it's worth the wait from the point of view of the kind of speeches that we've heard from all those who have spoken before me. Today I'm here to join all of you all to talk about Modi at 20, the book which was released. And the context is talking about the book and also about how people have contributed in that book. And what is it that they had to say about Modi, who had spent 20 years and who is still continuing to be a people's representative, being the Prime Minister, who himself calls himself as Pradhan Sevak. But to have uninterrupted 20 years of being a public representative, people's representative, and in those remarkable 20 years, the kind of work that he's done, first in Gujarat and after that as Prime Minister of this country, are all captured in that book through various writers. I actually will start with a reference to the details Dr. Jayaprakash Narayanan spoke. He'd spoken about what he has learned and experienced in, let us say, 2 or 3 things. One was about the water-starved Gujarat, which is in completely arid area and also has a huge big district, Kutch, which is a salt and marshy desert. He spoke about how that water-starved Gujarat, because of good planning, became sort of self-sufficient. And the Narmada Andolan, Narmada Abhiyan and so on. Then he also referred to how in days when there were power shortages all over the country, which was nothing new for all of us, with very detailed planning, Gujarat became, what he didn't say, but I'll add, a power surplus state. And at that time, for a state in India to say, I'm power surplus, I have surplus power, I'm willing to send the power to the neighboring states, if at least for that I get the connection to the grid. So he had that kind of a build my state in such a way that it can help India grow, because if one state grows, it adds to the growth of the country. And therefore today when we talk about PM quoting Vishwaguru and saying India with this kind of a talented population, with this kind of a commitment to growing, and with this kind of an uninterrupted good majority given by the people forming the government, it is possible that India can lead global growth as well. So we keep saying not just Vishwaguru, but we are the engine of growth. So with all that said, you heard Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan. The book has very many such people who have closely worked with the former Chief Minister of Gujarat and now the Prime Minister, and looked at him in a very perceptive kind of way to understand how these 20 years have made him that kind of a Prime Minister, understanding the ground reality, being connected to the people of India. So each one has given their own experience. I will only highlight some of them. They are all high professionals who have contributed in that book. Each one is an expert in their own area, not because of association with Prime Minister Modi, and also because of association with Prime Minister Modi is what I will add. So each one has spoken about their area in which they saw the Prime Minister functioning and delivering on results without discrimination for the entire country to benefit from. So if you had each one of these experiences being observed and recorded in that book, you get to know the complete picture of what is Prime Minister Modi made of, that he stands out even today by various different agencies who are talking to their own country people to say the level of popularity, level of acceptability, the level of trust that they have in their leaders. Post-COVID, that has become a benchmark on how they've handled the pandemic. That is why when you today see periodically, probably every 6 months or sometimes even earlier than that, countries having their surveys being done, and the level of trust that their people have in their own leaders. And if anything, that trust for Indians in Prime Minister Modi is only growing and building more confidence, and therefore the connect is kept intact. Now I'll just quote 3 or 4 of them who have written in the book. They are in their own way good high degree professionals. I start with Ajit Doval, who is the National Security Advisor. He's contributed in this book. He speaks about how to reform an institution such as the DRDO. Hyderabadis know that you have a lot of these defense research and development organizations. Some of them are in Hyderabad. They're all over the country. There was a time when India, because of the linkages that we've had with USSR, we built a lot of these defense research institutions, funded them publicly, expected them to build a lot of things. They've done remarkably well for their capacities through the last 70 years. Even today, many of them contribute. But some of them were set up for, with justifiable reason then, I'm not criticizing, but do we have a relevance for them today is a question. And therefore, the reform of DRDO. For instance, today a specialized DRDO center focusing only on clothing material may not be required anymore, because today the clothing industry has developed in so many different ways. In the private sector, you probably get cost efficient clothing for defense purposes, whether you want it for a parachute or for a uniform of a soldier. Today you get it all in the private sector at a competitive rate, and therefore you may want to have attention of the DRDO focusing on more core defense research. But such justifications will have to be so very well understood by the people themselves and those who are attached to the DRDO, who serve the purpose very well. But reforming DRDO, which had more than 40, I think, institutions, was a mammoth task, which PM has undertaken, and today there is some kind of a synergy being brought in, and DRDO is expected to move forward into frontier areas where India's Atma Nirbharta in defense can be brought about. This is not an easy task, but if you take the book and read what NSA, the current National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, writes about the reforms that he's done for the DRDO, you will get to know how a very tricky, sensitive, and also a very, very important area of rationalizing the functions of research institutes, particularly those who are focused on defense. You get a picture there, you get an understanding of what it takes to be a leader in taking such a decision for the nation's interest. Now, if that was on defense, I quickly move over to talk about how India's image all over the world as somebody, as a country which responds in its own way but builds confidence among the Committee of Nations. Shankar, the foreign minister, has written a very good detailed account as how India, as the first responder in this region, has actually stood by our neighbors and actually performed in such a way that without anywhere causing worries about sovereign territory, encroaching into sovereign territory, has helped in time and helped with an understanding of the emergency that the country is in. Whether you look at water being taken to the island nation Maldives, when they had a severe shortage of drinking water. Then when you had India being the first country responding to Nepal when there was an earthquake. When India responded to Indonesia when there was a tsunami, that was in 2018. Then you had India responding to Yemen, where you had to, first of all, war-torn, there was a lot of worry. People were evacuated from there in time, and in that it wasn't just Indians, but anyone who had to get out of there, they were all brought out and then sent to their respective country. So India as a first responder, understanding, and even in Bangladesh, where they had a problem once, we had Operation Maitri, I think, which went to help in the Rohingya crisis at that time in Bangladesh. So we extended help. So India's image as a country which stands by the national interest, but at the same time taking care of the neighborhood, the immediate neighborhood, which is now just not so constricted to immediately our land border countries, but also those who are in the Indian Ocean region. So if Jaishankar can give you that account, who has been a career diplomat, you see what emphasis is placed on the way in which it has been handled. And of course, I don't need to talk about the way in which our students were brought back from Ukraine. And at that time, ministers had to go there and be sure that these students can come back with safety. There has never been a moment of delay in handling such crisis under Prime Minister Modi. So if Jaishankar as a career diplomat has written that, and it's all in great detail in the book, then I move over to talking about COVID, the pandemic, where a doctor of eminence, and all of you are familiar with the face, familiar with the name, because you would have also seen him being invited for television debates, Dr. Shetty. He writes about very clearly how the COVID pandemic was handled by us. And of course, the recent report which has come out, which talks about India handling the crisis. I think it's a World Bank report, which says how India has successfully handled in taking timely decisions, whether it is getting PPE kits or whether it is making sure there are enough testing labs in this country, where we had only 2 testing labs for viral diseases. We suddenly increased the number to more than 2,000. All that was possible because you knew where to take the decision, at what level decisions will have to be taken and so on. So Dr. Shetty gets into the detail of COVID management. It's, all this is in the book. You heard a person who has not written in the book talk about Prime Minister Modi, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan. There are others who have written in the book about each one of these experiences. So if you had Dr. Shetty talking about health, you have Ashok Gulati writing about how, and this is very important, agriculture in a state like Gujarat, which is water starved, during the 13 years, or short of 13 years, when Prime Minister Modi as Chief Minister was in Gujarat, agriculture growth in that state was continuously so high and well above the national average. 9.2, 9.3 per year growth in agriculture in a water-starved Gujarat. And that was not just the basic crops of groundnut, which grows there, but cotton, many other crops growing there. Together, therefore, finding the right market, together making sure that these had the right prices for the farmers. Ashok Gulati, who's a top-notch agriculture economist, writes that, and it is in this book, and he says this kind of a growth compares even better than what Punjab had during the Green Revolution. Green Revolution was a nationally supported agriculture, a progressive, very big step. So the growth achieved during the Green Revolution was even bettered by a Gujarat which had no water in it. That is the consistency with which end result is kept before the administrator, plans things accordingly, executes it, takes it forward, that okay, all this was achieved when he was there. And the results are showing even today that Kutch, which is the biggest district in the country, if I know right, and is a salty marsh land, and of course which had a horrible earthquake coming out of it, today it is the biggest horticulture producer. Fruits of all kinds, bananas, dragon fruits, all grow in Gujarat, particularly in Kutch, resulting in a massive export of horticulture products from Gujarat. So if you take a decision, if you execute it, it doesn't give you result for just today, tomorrow, it continues for a very long time. And people after that get motivated and they are self-propelled after that. So the result in agriculture, based on what has happened in Gujarat, is so well explained by Ashok Gulati, who is an agricultural economist. So if you look at it, you have experts saying about his administrative capability, about how he gets the end result, how results are sustainable after that, and how there is no prejudice in achieving these results. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. But more importantly, here is a leader who doesn't think, oh, I'm the Prime Minister, I've given you orders, you execute it. He makes sure from the planning stage, consults people, brings in opinions, takes all the experts to tell him what has to be done, then puts in the reality into place about the capability of different departments, how much can it be improved, work together with the states. So execution has to happen not just by the center but also the states. And then after that is the plan program in front of him. Execution, at every stage of execution. Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan alluded to it. At every stage of execution, he is personally monitoring it. How would he do it for the entire country? It's all right, he would have done it in Gujarat. But entire country today, monthly once he talks to district collectors to know what level the programs are. The program is called Pragati, where through video conferencing he gets the district collectors on board and says, all right, you tell me on this project what's happening. Post that, in fact, I'll come back to what I have to say now, but I want to allude to something else which has a relation to what I'm saying here. 116 districts were identified in this country as aspirational districts. But the mindset is very important for you to recognize here. He could have just said, oh, they're still backward, they're backward districts. They're not backward. The people there want higher achievements. Many districts within some of the states, even those developed states, are still remaining less than the developed state districts of that state. So he said those people are no less. I will not call them backward. Call them aspirational because they want to be at par with the developed districts and take the activity forward. And in that, not just the district collectors through Pragati, ministers were asked to go back, go to those aspirational districts, no new money being given to them, but all those schemes which have benefited many other districts should benefit them also. Why is it not reaching there? You will ensure that saturation is reached in each one of the schemes in those districts. His argument was, unless every one of our 756 districts are equally developed, the country cannot be developed at all. So for those who are, I don't know, for whatever reason, want to say, no, Modi prefers only BJP states. Modi wants only the Hindi belt states to prosper and he doesn't care about South India. I'm sorry, you may have your prejudices, Modi doesn't. There are no prejudice used there. He had no business actually to identify 116 of these not so developed districts and also make sure their ministers go sit and do the job. He didn't bring new resources to it, but he said, why isn't the other scheme working there? So consistently his approach is treat everyone equally, but lift everyone up equally. I've seen it myself, and there are writers in that book who say it as well. So I come back to talking about rigorous planning, participating and making sure the process is executed thoroughly. More importantly, bring in technology wherever it is possible. You have to make way for technology. And why? Is it that he's obsessed with using the gadgets? Is it because he's obsessed with, oh, India can do it? It's because it brings transparency. It stops rent seeking. It stops people tweaking things to their favor. It makes it all obvious and everything is available in a dashboard, real time. Go check it up if anybody has given any undue favors. Technology supports purely because of this ground. And therefore today you see everything is up, tenders are put up, Air India is privatized. Nobody can raise a finger against any of the decision taken. Technology brings that advantage. It makes it possible for everyone to claim what we are doing is right and it is there for you to see. Similar was this question today, which I had to answer, but I will say that it'll help the situation. He respects the taxpayers' money. He doesn't want it to be wasted. He doesn't allow it to be parked somewhere for somebody's sake, and then he can always say, but yeah, I've given that money, but if it's not moving towards completion of the project, what can I do? No. Today we have digitized government expenditure. If there is a central scheme where central government has to give 60% and the state has to give 40%, the moment the state puts that money, that very minute, central government 60% will be there. Single nodal account system, digitized system, has brought value to the taxpayers' money. It goes where the action is, where the project is working out. It doesn't get parked somewhere and politics can be played on it. The moment the contribution has come, center's money also goes in there. So more efficient taxpayers' money's use cannot be envisaged when you have a system like this, because nobody can complain that money hasn't come. It's there up for everyone to see who are in the decision-making pool. Money has come. So that is the kind of every level efficiency has to be brought in, technology has to be brought in, every region has to grow. People have written, each one has written a lot of account on it. There are data-based reports written by Professor Shamika Ravi. There are others who have, just given recognition of what he's done as, appreciation, letters of appreciation. There are many others like Nripendra Mishra, who's been his advisor. He's been the secretary to the principal secretary to the PM. Talks about the way in which he thinks about how to build it all up. Modular approach. He builds one brick, laterally spreads it so that every aspect is covered, every citizen gets covered who's eligible for something. Then having done that, he builds the next layer of bricks, and so it goes, the pyramid gets built so that complete saturation is achieved. That is where the Jan Dhan account is a classic example. Bring the citizen to have a financial inclusive experience of having a bank account. Give him an identity. If necessary, give him a RuPay card. But try to make sure that it is KYC'd, in the sense Aadhaar account linked. And then he is kept continuously informed through the mobile information that he receives. Post this, that very classic example of, 100 rupees sent, not everything goes to him, the citizen. Today 100 means 100 goes, because the citizen knows through his phone he is getting it. So that's the second layer. Third layer is the layer of account aggregators. You've got a bank account, you've been dealing with your account for a couple of months, your credit rating is available, you can sit at home and through your phone give consent to the account aggregator, who will then ensure that the data is available to the banks, and you can choose from the banks where you want to do business. In the sense, your savings account can be in one bank. In some other bank, the rate of interest being given for, let's say, a small time term loan is better, you can choose that. Third layer comes up. So financial inclusion built at the bottom with Jan Dhan account is now moving towards higher goals. That India stack that we are talking about. When I said Vishwaguru to begin with, Vishwaguru indeed even on technology driven processes. Payment systems which India has developed, digital payment systems. No country, and I'm saying this with confidence, no country has the scope and the scale of what we are doing. There may be some countries dealing with 5 million citizens, 10 million citizens. We have repeatedly proven how digital technology, which has now precipitated to be digital payments also, you can do everything digitally. The India stack is now almost coveted to become the global stack. Thanks entirely due to the Prime Minister's push for fintech industries. So this and more can be read through the book. I wouldn't want to add more here. I'll mention one more, Anupam Kher, who's also contributed in that book, very clearly and beautifully says, in his own simple words, the Prime Minister continuously has remained in power for 20 years. It cannot be without the trust of the people. And that trust is what keeps Modi where he is. So the authors have actually given a beautiful picture of what our Prime Minister is made of. We are indeed very fortunate. You may think that I belong to his cabinet. I'm a member of his Council of Ministers. I belong to the party to which he's a senior leader. And therefore I'm saying this. I would say it anytime, anywhere, even if I weren't to be in BJP. But India is lucky to have had a leader like this during this time. And this is not a statement of flattery. I honestly want you to take it. I'm sure there are a lot of them out there who are my political opponents who will say, oh my God, she is doing such brazen chamchagiri. I don't mind. It is true that there is a leader who didn't give any fear in the minds of the people or suspicion in the minds of the people during COVID. He stood right front of us and said, this is how we'll go on. I'll ensure the country is safe. He had the vaccines made. He also ensured that the vaccines were produced as much. I also will have to add that, not just talking about PPE kits or others, Dr. Shetty, COVID experience, also talks about how vaccines were produced. But today, every citizen of India knows that more than 220 billion doses have been, 220 crore doses have already been given to people of India. Many countries who kept stocks of vaccines could not vaccinate all their citizens. Not just only vaccinate all citizens, but to give them on their phone a digital certificate with which you could go. There's actually a narration which one of our ministers keeps repeating whenever he went abroad. And in fact, his own son had to search from his pocket and take a piece of paper and show, this is my certificate. And this minister had to show his phone and say, this is mine, take it. Digital certification for every dose that you received. A CoWIN app which was created during that time, standing out as a testimony how even simple matters for a simple ordinary citizen can be digitally provided to make his life easy. He doesn't have to carry bulks of paper. So I can go on like this. You will say, yes, you are a minister in his cabinet and therefore I don't mind. But if my analysis and my reporting is not objective, you're welcome to criticize. But if you hate somebody and you want to criticize, that's your choice. But the country needs a leader like Modi, and that is how we've been very clearly benefiting from it. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk before you. Thanks.
I request all of you all to wait. We have national anthem also after the vote of thanks. A small felicitation. No one should come on the desk, please. Mr. Premraj Yadav and Mr. Sudhakar Sharma will felicitate the guests with shawls. I request Mr. Chatur and his team. I request Dr. Varpan Padma to directly, hello, hey, V.S. Suranaji, please. Don't come on the stage directly, sir, please. I request Dr. Padma to kindly propose vote of thanks.
On behalf of the organizers and all of us, please vacate the stage for a few minutes. Kindly cooperate, please vacate the stage. Kindly cooperate, please vacate the stage. Hey, Babu. Hey, ఏంటిది అందరూ వెళ్ళిపోయారు అది మన వాళ్ళు వెళ్ళి వెరీ బ్యాడ్ ఇక్కడ ఉన్న